everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today's topic is a really interesting one that really tends to put a lot of pressure on the players. And this is something that obviously is not for everybody, and a lot of people really do crack under the pressure of some of these games. It was actually brought up on one of my other videos that I did relatively recently, the program movement one, and the topic for today is games that are real time. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is a game that has some kind of clock on you. There are a ton of games that do this, but for the purposes of this video, I'm actually going to avoid a lot of them. I'm going to be avoiding, by and large, the party-type games. So, we're talking about things like Pictionary and charades and things of that nature, where the whole point is you're trying to, guess a thing, draw a thing, do a thing, whatever it is, in some set amount of time. I'm going to be talking more about games that are of the hobby sort, so to speak, the more intense games that do something similar, where you have a set amount of time to complete a task. You are trying to do it as quickly as possible. Now, there's a decent mix in terms of the types of games here, where I've got some cooperative, I've got some competitive, I got a little of this, a little of that, and I do have one, well, maybe two that can really be considered party games, but like I said, I really tried to stay away from those by and large, simply because those are almost expected to have some kind of a timer to them. That said, a couple of other really good ones, like Wits and Wagers. Great party game, amazing game, but you use a timer and it doesn't really do much except to simply move the game along. It's not part of a core mechanic. Same thing for something like Two Rooms and a Boom. A tremendously fun party game if you can get a crowd big enough for it. The problem is, again, the timing aspect is mostly just to keep the game moving rather than a core mechanic of some aspect of the game. And that's really more of what I'm focusing on to the large extent. As always, though, I am very anxious to hear what you guys have to say about this. It's a really intriguing topic, and mostly I'm curious, are these types of games ones that you like? I personally tend not to like them as much as other types of games, simply because I like to be able to sit and think a little bit about what I'm going to do. Even if it comes down to, we're going around the table, and as people are doing their thing, I can think about my thing. Sometimes you can do that in these types of games, but not too often. A lot of times it's all simultaneous, and that's part of the point, is that you have the chaos ensuing of all that. I'm generally okay with that. I'm okay with simultaneous actions and all that kind of good stuff, but sometimes it can wear a little bit thin, so to speak. But either way, I hope that you enjoy this video. We'll go ahead and get started off with my personal number 5. Number 5 on this list is the only game that I do not own, and it's also one of the two that can really be considered a party game, which is why it's on the bottom of the list. The game itself is Codenames. Codenames is a very fun social game where it's kind of like Password. If you guys have watched old game shows, I know that just shows how old I am, but either way, the point is that you have teams. You have two teams. You have the red and the blue, and the idea is that you have a large grid of names, and you have one person who is acting as the clue giver, and the rest of the team are acting as guessers. So the idea is that you want to say whatever names are, or whatever code names that are associated with your team, you want to somehow connect them with a single word. So for example, if you have jet and pilot and air or something like that, then you might say plane. And then the idea after that is you say the number of cards associated with it. So you might say plane 3, and then you can say plane. You can spell which one it is so that people aren't thinking it's oh, do you mean a plain sausage? Why was I going to say sausage? Plain bagel or whatever. So you can figure that kind of thing out. Either way, it's a really fun game, and the reason that it's at the bottom of the list is two reasons. First off, because it really is a party game in the end, and meh party games. The other major reason is that the timed element really is not necessary. You do not have to use it. It has one of the little hourglass timers that you flip over, and so it's not required that you use it, and generally when I play, we don't use it, simply because it can be very difficult to make those associations, whether you are the guesser or the guessee, whatever it happens to be. not the guessee, but the clue giver or the clue receiver part of the team. It can be difficult, so I rarely use it, but sometimes, you know, I play with like hardcore people, and again, it really puts the pressure on, which is the idea, and it works very, very well. But either way, it's a tremendously fun game. Go out and try it if you haven't done so already. Codenames, my number 5. At number 4, I've got another game that is sort of like a party atmosphere type of thing, but not as much as its original game, so to speak. I know, it sounds really complicated. Suffice to say, the game itself is Werewolf, specifically Werewolf One Night. For those of you who haven't played this, the idea is that you are a specific role, and then things happen, and then you have to figure out at the end who the werewolf or werewolves are. And the reason that I really like this as far as a real-time game is that everything is happening at the end. Everybody is interacting with one another. We got everything on the table, so to speak, and it's just like things are flying back and forth and this and that and the other thing, and it's really fun. It's a really cool little game. In this case, I've got the fancy Broken Token Collector's box thing that I actually got from Kickstarter for the Vampire Edition with this. So this has like all of the One Night things. The only one that I do not have is the original Werewolf, which actually required a moderator in order to use. Now, the reason that this is a bit lower on the list is for the same reason as Codenames, where this really does have more of a party type mystique, so to speak, I guess you could say. Whatever you want to call it, it feels more like a party game than anything else. It is very much a social game, which is not bad. And again, it doesn't exclude it from this list because you are still making somewhat snap decisions, moving things around, talking to people very quickly, trying to move and do and this and that and the other thing. It's a lot of fun. It can be a little bit chaotic, but in my opinion, it's not nearly as chaotic as some of the other ones that I'm going to be talking to you about. So get ready for those because those are even bigger, better, stronger, faster. But suffice it to say, Werewolf One Night is a great way to get sort of into the spirit of having this sort of timed action requirement thing. If you haven't tried it before, this is a good foray into it. On top of that, it's got a great app that actually does the timing for you and also the announcements for the different roles and what they do. But either way, Werewolf One Night is my number 4. For my top 3 games, you're actually going to see quite a distinct pattern of them, and you'll hopefully you'll be able to see. Actually, there's 2 patterns, and one of the patterns actually involves my number 5 game as well. We'll see if you can figure out what that first pattern is too. But suffice it to say, these are all games that are very distinctly have the real-time aspect as a very core mechanic. The fact that you are timed is an extremely important aspect in the decision-making process, and it means that that's how the game moves forward, as opposed to like Codenames and Werewolf One Night, which again are both great games. The thing is that with them, not only do you not necessarily need the timer, but it doesn't inherently well, it does help the game, but it's not necessary to the game itself. Whereas these 3 it is. But suffice it to say, at number 3, we have Galaxy Trucker. Now, for me particularly, I have the Anniversary Edition Galaxy Trucker, which has like all the expansions, or at least 2 of the expansions, I think it is. It's got a lot going on with it, essentially. For those of you who don't know, the real-time aspect of Galaxy Trucker is when you are building your ship. So the whole point of this game is that you're building a ship so that you can go and ship goods across the galaxy, hence Galaxy Trucker. You're a freight driver, whatever you want to call it. The thing is that when you are building your ship, you have a big pile of components, and you pick them out one at a time, take a look at them, see if you want to put it on your ship. If you don't, you put it back, grab another one. The thing is, everybody is doing this at the exact same time, and it becomes exceedingly chaotic. But again, that's the entire point of this list. We want that aspect. We want that furious whoa type of feeling going on. And the interesting thing with this particular game is that how quickly you finish actually determines the order in which you go to the next stage of the game. So the faster you finish, then the sooner you get to move out, so to speak. But the problem is, if you have somebody who's sitting there waiting and just sort of biding their time, picking out just the right pieces that they want, all that kind of stuff, then they might have a distinct advantage even if they're going later in the turn. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted this higher on the list, because that real-time aspect really has a very, very true effect on the game itself. I absolutely love it. It's tremendously fun, but obviously not for everybody, just like everything on this list. If you are a person who likes to think about things and really try to figure out what's going on, definitely not something that you want to dive into initially, at least. But either way, Galaxy Trucker, my number 3. And number 2, I've got a game that uses the real-time aspect in a very unique way. It presents it very uniquely, which I absolutely love. This particular one is actually a programmed movement-based game, and it's also a cooperative, which is another thing that I really, really love about it. The game itself is Space Alert. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the way that this works in terms of the real time is you actually have a CD that you play as you are going through this game. And the CD tells you what's going on. It's really cool. It's a very unique mechanic, and it's just a ton of fun. It's nice because it's a surprisingly replayable game, even though you're going off of a CD. I mean, you got different tracks and all this kind of stuff, and it works in a really cool way, I should say. I don't want to give too much away, but suffice it to say, this is a program movement game, and you're essentially saying, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But as you're doing all of that, you're getting attacked from all sides, you're running into aliens, you're running into other ships, blah, 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 blah. Like, all this kind of stuff is happening, and it's because of the CD. So that is the real-time aspect. And again, this creates a very high-pressure situation for all of the players, and not everybody can handle that. Not everybody can stand the pressure, which is not a bad thing. It's perfectly fine if this is not your style of game. But this... I mean, the top 3 here really epitomize what I'm talking about with this category, where the whole point is that you have a very chaotic scene, or the entire game is a very chaotic scene, and it just makes it relatively difficult to work through, but at the same time, either once you get used to it, or if you sort of thrive under that particular type of pressure, you can have an absolute blast. But Space Alert, very unique, love the CD-ROM mechanic, ton of fun, great cooperative game, plus you can actually play it solo as well. Overall, my number 2. And number 1 is a game that I have talked about several times, but mostly in the context of this is a game about a game. I've talked about it in the meta sense rather than the actual this is a cool game sense necessarily. Either way, the game itself is XCOM Enemy Unknown. For those of you who have not played this, or maybe you have, whatever it happens to be, this is, for me personally, it feels like sort of an upgraded version of Space Alert. Space Alert uses a CD-ROM to have the random events occur. XCOM actually uses an app that you download, put on your phone, your tablet, whatever it happens to be, and then the app actually plays through. You've got different campaigns. Again, this is a cooperative game. The one big thing with this is you actually have very specific roles. So, for example, you have the commander, who is in charge of everything. They distribute the money. You have the people in charge of the science. You have the people in charge of engineering. You have the people in charge of the combat, all of that kind of stuff. You have these individual and very distinct roles, which is very cool, and again, relatively unique amongst many games. Not to mention just this, but I love the app. I love the randomization that it gives you. But again, the rounds can be extremely chaotic, especially if you're playing on higher difficulty levels, because then you're talking about, you know, like, distribute the money at this time, distribute the money at this time. Oh no, aliens are doing this. Oh, aliens are doing that. Distribute this money. Blah, 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 blah. All this kind of stuff. And again, it's very chaotic, but it is controlled chaos in terms of you can know the possibilities of what could happen, but at the same time you have absolutely no clue of what will happen, which for me makes it tremendously fun, very, very exciting. Again, one of the things that I like about this one and Space Alert, by the same token, is the co-op aspect. Because you're working together rather than against each other, like in Galaxy Trucker, it makes it a little bit easier to sort of like lean on your fellow people. So in that sense, it can be a lot less devastating, essentially, because otherwise you just be like, and you're totally freaking out. But the reason that XCOM is above Space Alert for me personally is primarily because I really love XCOM, the PC game, or console game in my case. I got it first on the console, now I have it on PC. But I think that Fantasy Flight did an excellent job of capturing the dynamic and the feel of the original video game and putting it into the board game. That said, the two are very, very close to each other. They're very similar in terms of exactly what you're doing. They're very similar in terms of the context, all of that kind of stuff. But XCOM, I think, is just a little bit cooler. I love the fact that you get to use the app and all that kind of stuff. Very, very cool. Tons of fun. XCOM, my #1 real-time board game. So that's it for me, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite real-time, so to speak, board games. Again, I know this is a very interesting category. I know the primary thing that I'm interested in from you guys as far as feedback is concerned is I want to know, is this a category that you personally enjoy? Or are you one of the people where, like me, in general, I personally like to have more of, I like to be able to think a little bit more. Having something, especially with Space Alert or XCOM, where everything is not only happening simultaneously, but the actions are all taking place simultaneously and everything is just going crazy wackadoodle and this kind of thing. Whereas, you know, with Codenames and Werewolf, since they have that more party vibe, it feels like you have to do a lot less. You don't have to focus quite as much, and it's not nearly as sort of brain rattling compared to the others. And that's part of why I wanted them on this list, because they are good, especially for new people who want to try it, or try the category, that is to say. But the other thing too is, what do you guys think about the co-op versus competitive aspect too? I personally, well, you guys know I love co-op games just in general. But for something like this in particular, having a cooperative aspect is very, very important for me personally, especially if I'm playing with new players. The last thing that I want is to have somebody just be completely overwhelmed and eventually like devastated because they had to think so quickly and just were not able to. They just couldn't wrap their brains around it quickly enough. It's not bad by any means. It's just that some people are not particularly wired for that. So having the co-op aspect really, really helps with that. Whereas something like Galaxy Trucker, where everybody's just competing for the individual parts, it can drive people pretty insane relatively quickly. But that said, I'm going to stop rambling now. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, please leave any and all feedback in the comments below, including games you'd like to see me review, or other ideas for lists that you'd like to see, anything along those lines. Either way, thank you very much again for being here, and I will see you next time. Thank you again for watching my video on my top 5 favorite so-called real-time games. I know that this is a very unique category that can span a lot of different things and have some different interpretations, but I'm very, very curious. What do you guys think about this? This is one of those that can really make or break a game entirely. If you see this and you do not like the type of mechanics, it can mean that you never ever want to play the game again. I want to know what you guys think. Do you like these games? Do you not like them? What are your personal favorites? All that good stuff. As always, I got some of my playlists linked up at the top of the page, and you can click on the big giant subscribe button to see more of me in the future. With that, thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time.